As well as the comics, a rich mix of musicians took part. Classical guitarist John Williams played Cavatina from the Vietnam War film The Deer Hunter.
I was never interested much in music for its own sake. I wanted something that was vaguely amusing, that there would be a point song with witty lyrics or something like that.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've suffered for my music. Now it's your turn.
I thought the best thing I could do under those circumstances was the protest song, which some people said, oh, it's an attack on Bob Dylan, and Donovan, bless him, said, all my friends saying you're having a go at me. I'm not. It's not, it's just that at that time there were a lot of people doing kind of protest songs, and all of them seemed to be, making rather a lot of money doing it. So that was the angle I was coming from.
All the prophets of doom can always find room in a world full of worry and fear. Tip cigarettes and chemistry sets, and Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer. So I'm going back to my little old shack and drink me a bottle of wine. That was meat en bouteille before my birthday, and have me a fucking good time.
There was still a sense, I suppose, a hangover from Watergate and the Vietnam War and so on, that young people were naturally inclined to protest injustice wherever they found it, in a way that now, in our very cynical, ironic, postmodern way, we find rather kind of hysterical, perhaps, and rather inarticulate. Young people are now so soaked in financial worries and career thoughts and ambitions that they seem to have very little time for international politics.
When rain has hung the leaves with tears, I want you near, for to kill my fears, to help me to leave all my blues behind. For standing in your heart is where I wanna be, and I long to be. But I may as well try and catch. I may as well try and catch.
I felt we were the last generation of those people who went to university who still kind of cared about being socially different and daring and, wanting to change the world.
Fighting in the streets with our children at our feet, and the morals that they worship will be gone, and the men who spurred us on.
When rock star Pete Townsend played with John Williams, there was no time to set up equipment, so Pete played an acoustic version for the first time.
I take a bow for the new Constitution, sitting green at the new revolution, smiling green
between police and demonstrators. And tomorrow is likely to be only the start of what could be a season of violence in Chile. But the security forces killed 8 people and arrested 300. Amnesty says it's likely these people will have been tortured during questioning.
We don't get fooled again.
It is in particular the people in other countries who are mouthy, who get it in the neck. And you don't have to be a comic or a writer or a singer to do that. You can just be an ordinary person who talks too much. And that's essentially what comics and singers and writers do. They just talk too much. God bless us, we're allowed to do that, and they're not.
Singer-songwriters were, murdered just for being singer-songwriters in Chile. Victor Jara was a case in point. I sang in the stadium he was murdered in, and danced with mothers of people who'd also been murdered in that very, very spot. It was a very symbolic and an emotional thing for all of us. It really touches something when you realize that what you do in freedom and you do in joy. You could be doing the same thing in another regime and be murdered for it.
History can't be blamed, 'cause the banners were all thrown in the last war.
Governments are really keen on locking people up that they don't like. It's as simple as that. And so I think one's got to have eyes and ears out all the time, and voices that will shout out and say, this is wrong, this is terrible.
We don't get fooled again.
In my travels, when I'd meet the leader or president of that country, the first thing I do is read them the amnesty report on that country. It really terrifies these brutes.
After the Thatcher election in 1979, a new ethos swept the country. With the selfish culture of the 80s came a more ruthless breed of political comedy.
Mrs. Thatcher's hand, oh. She had a sore hand, oh. 4 million unemployed, but oh. Yeah, because the tendons were constricting. That's true, in her hand. The tendons were constricting and drawing in the fingers to form a claw.
You mustn't deal with these people.
Why not, Nancy, old honey bun?
Because they're communists.
Communists? Where?
There!
That's your hand. You mean your hand's a communist? You've been infiltrated?
No. Those people.
Oh, come on, Nance. How do you know?
Because they want to free dissidents.
The amnesty shows changed direction with more brash and often savage humour. This was even reflected in the new Oxbridge comics, Hugh Laurie and Stephen Fry.
Dear God.
I want to go to bed with you.
What was I doing?
It was around that time, wasn't it, Jim, when you were in the middle of rather a messy divorce with the woman who was chiefly responsible for writing your scripts. And it was from then on that things started really to go wrong for you, isn't it?
Blimey.
Ooh. Did you find, Jim, that once you stopped being mad, you stopped being funny? You know?
And then, of course, you let down Amnesty by refusing to do their annual charity show.
It was damn sporting of Mr. Cleese to allow us to do that, wasn't it?
Look, he's got nothing to say for himself. Without his dead parrot, he's nobody. It's tragic. This is the wreck of a once noble comedian.
Have had it up to here with sex, those nylon vests and hairy necks. They expect you to be flighty and they act like God Almighty because they've got a cock and they can mend a flex. And when they proudly strip and pose, I want to say, what's one of those? They tend to feel a failure if you don't love their genitalia. Though why you should, Christ only knows.
One of the things that grew out of the amnesty shows was the, as it were, seamless takeover of that generation by what were called, in the early 80s, alternative comedians. One of the main features of the third show was Alexei Sayle.